So hey guys, and welcome to the early resource farming guide. In this video you're gonna see the results of the first wave of testing that I did in the new solar system. In my tests I tried to be as consistent as possible, so I did all the missions with Ember Prime running a World on Fire build, Ignis running a Combustion Beam build, Lex Prime with a Crit build, Nikana Prime with a Crit build, and Carrier Prime with Sweeper Prime. I didn't use any resource multiplication like Necrosis Desecrate or Ivara's Prowl, and I didn't use any resource boosters. Also, if you look into the description below this video, you will find timestamps for certain resources, and some resources will be paired together, and that's because they can be farmed very effectively in one mission. And just one more thing before we jump into farming: if you really want to farm a lot of resources, you should run it in a party because you will have more spawns. You should have Necros with Desecrate, Ivara with Prowl, Hydroid with Pilfering Swarm, or even Atlas with Ore Gaze, and maybe you should consider getting a resource booster which will double the amount of resources that you get per resource drop. The mission that performed the best when farming Oxium, Rubedo, and Fieldron samples was Baal on Europa. This is a Corpus mobile defense mission that has 2 to 3 terminals and a ton of Oxium Ospreys. The enemy spawns are also very dense, resulting in high amounts of kills at the end of a mission, which translates into a lot of resources. On average, you're gonna get around 350 Rubedo, 80 Oxium, and about 10 Fieldron samples per mission. Void may not be as popular as it once was before the Spectres of the Rail update, but it's still really good for farming, and one good example is the Sabotage mission Storybog. This is sort of a medium level sabotage mission that you get to from Europa, and it's great for farming Ferrite, Argon crystals, and control modules. The reason why I chose a sabotage mission over an endless mission is because sabotage missions encourage you to explore, which means you will find a lot of containers which drop resources fairly often, rare containers which can drop fully built formats, boosters, and more, vault containers which can drop some really nice mods that you can even sell for platinum, and lockers which once again like to drop a lot of resources and nav coordinates. On top of that, each cache you find is gonna give you a nice bonus, whether it is a credit cache, fusion core pack, or even Neurodes. And on average you can expect around 1800 ferrite, 1 argon crystal, and 2 to 3 control modules per mission. The good old Dark Sector survival Wahiba on Mars. It used to be really good with Solar Chart 2.0, and it did not disappoint this time around either. It is still amazing and probably the best mission for farming Salvage and Morphics. High enemy spawn rates with relatively low levels and high resource drop chances make this a really good farming mission. And on average you're gonna get around 4000 salvage and 2 to 3 morphics every 5 minutes. It's also not bad for farming Fieldron samples, although it's not as good as Baal on Europa. Malva on Venus wasn't really that popular with Solar Chart 2.0. It was an infested excavation that would drop Tower 2 and Tower 3 keys on rotation B. However, with Solar Chart 3.0, Malva has been changed into a Dark Sector survival mission, and it's really good for farming alloy plates and circuits. Malva on Venus is very similar to Wahiba on Mars. It has high enemy spawn density, high resource drop rate, and relatively low enemy level, which makes it an awesome farming mission. And on average you're gonna get around 600 alloy plates and 300 circuits after 5 minutes. It's also pretty good for farming polymer bundles, although not as good as the next mission. This mission has been changed a little bit because it's no longer a submersible mission. The mission I'm talking about is Asur on Uranus, which is amazing for farming polymer bundles and plastids. Here you can expect around 400 polymer bundles and 200 plastids after just 5 minutes. Which is really good, especially with plastids because they're a secondary resource, so they're pretty hard to farm in large quantities. The amount of resources that you get from Asur is better than it used to be with Solar Chart 2.0, and I think it's because it's no longer a submersible mission, so you can't get Tellurium here. Farming sentience is still the best way of getting Neurodes, but since Draco has been changed from an amazing interception farm into a survival that's not so good, Plateau on Lua or Plateau on the Moon has also become one of the best missions for farming Detonite Ampules. It's a crossfire mission that's pretty easy to do, it's really fast, and it spawns sentience every time. However, I know a lot of people that prefer Tycho on the Moon, which is a survival mission, and it's just a matter of personal preference. Both missions are very effective, however they're different in the way you play them. With Plateau, you jump in, you kill everything, you get scanned by oculists, kill the sentients and extract, and with Tycho you just keep going, and every 5 minutes you get a new wave of sentients. Sentients are considered a mini-boss, so they have a very high chance of dropping uncommon or rare resources, so most of the time when you kill a sentient, it will either drop a Detonite Ampule or a Neurode. Some of my clanmates have also told me that they drop Orokin Cells, but even after all my testing, I haven't got a single one from them. So as far as I'm concerned, they don't drop Orokin Cells often enough for me to consider them a viable farm. But maybe you've had a different experience with them, so if you had them drop a lot of Orokin Cells, please let people know in the comment section so they know they can farm them for Orokin Cells as well. And just one tip before we move on to the next mission, bring a party, because the more people you have, the more sentients are gonna spawn when you get scanned by the Oculus, so you're gonna get more Neurodes and Detonite Ampules. Moving on to neurosensors, and for me, the best results came from the mission Themisto on Jupiter, which is the Salad V boss fight. Although I do know a lot of people that prefer Senai, which is a Dark Sector defense mission on Jupiter. I personally prefer the Salad V boss fight, which is Themisto, because I'm familiar with the tileset, I can run through it fairly quickly, and every time I tried Senai and I did my testing, it did not perform very well. So personally, I would recommend Themisto on Jupiter because from all the testing I did with Solarchart 2.0 and 3.0, on average I got 5 to 6 neurosensors per 10 runs, and each run is gonna take you between 2 to 5 minutes, which all depends on how familiar you're with the tileset and how many elevators you're gonna get. People tell me that they farm Gallium in many different missions. It can be Acer on Uranus, it can be Ophelia, War on Mars, but for me, the only mission that reliably drops Gallium is Titania on Uranus, which is the Tilregol boss fight. It is a submersible mission, so you will need Archwing, but for me it is the only mission that reliably drops Gallium. And from the testing I did once again with Solarchart 2.0 and 3.0, on average I got 7 Gallium per 10 runs. With Solarchart 2.0, the best way to farm Nano Spores was to farm the Orokin Derelict, even though the keys for Orokin Derelict cost Nano Spores to build. However, with Solarchart 3.0, it seems that Derelict drops have been nerfed quite significantly, so it's no longer worth it to farm Nano Spores there. And Ares has become the go-to planet for Nano Spores, more specifically the Zabala Dark Sector Survival mission, where after only 5 minutes you're gonna get around 4,000 Nano Spores. Even though the drops in Orokin Derelict have been nerfed quite significantly, it is still the best place for farming Mutagen Samples. And to get the biggest bang for your buck, I would recommend running endless missions, so either survival or defense. Personally, I would recommend running survival because in my opinion it is not fun to defend an objective while being crowd controlled by Ancients and Moas. And in survival you're gonna get somewhere between 2 to 4 Mutagen Samples after 5 minutes. The only reason why Orokin Cells weren't a big deal with Solarchart 2.0 was because of Draco, where you would basically get an Orokin Cell after every round. But with Solarchart 3.0 and the removal of Draco, Orokin Cells have become pretty difficult to get. And the only mission that reliably dropped Orokin Cells for me was Orokin Derelict Assassinate, which is the Lephantis boss fight. And this is pretty bad, because for Orokin Derelict Assassinate you need keys that take 1 hour to build, and you also need Lephantis nav coordinates, which you get in the Orokin Derelict. The reason why this mission is good for farming Orokin Cells is because Lephantis has 4 drops. Each head is a boss in itself, so it has a very high chance of dropping Orokin Cells, and finally when you kill all 3 heads and the floor crumbles and you fight Lephantis himself, he also has a chance of dropping Orokin Cells. so you're almost guaranteed to get an Orokin Cell after every Elephantis fight. However, as I've said already, this is not very good because you are limited by the amount of keys that you have. I failed to find a good spot for farming Orokin Cells outside of ODA. I've tried all the missions on Ceres, I've tried all the missions on Saturn, and I was not successful. I did not get a single Orokin Cell from all the testing I did on Ceres and on Saturn. But maybe I was just terribly unlucky, so the missions I would recommend you try are Exta on Ceres, Gabi on Ceres, Piscinas on Saturn, and Tethys on Saturn, because even though I didn't get Orokin Cells from them, they make the most sense. Cryotic is fairly straightforward, you simply get it from excavation missions, it doesn't really matter which ones you do. However, if you want to farm a lot of Cryotic, I would recommend running low-level missions so you can stay there for longer. So if you prefer to fight the Grenier, you can do Cervantes on Earth. If you prefer to find the Infested, you can do Tikal on Earth, and if you rather find the Corpus, you can do Kilikon on Venus. And the final resource we have is Tellurium, and the mission I would recommend for farming it is the mission Erpo on Earth. It's a mobile defense mission, so you're gonna have plenty of enemies, and if you bring 3 other friends, you're gonna have quite a few spawns. I don't want to talk about specific numbers because this is Archwing, so it's really easy to miss resources, and I had runs where I got 3 Tellurium and then I did 4 runs and I got 0, so it was either RNG or simply me being blind and not picking up resources. So yeah, as I've said already, I don't want to talk about specific numbers. Other mission that people like to do is Ophelia on Uranus, which is a submersible mission, so it does drop Tellurium. So if you're not a big fan of Archwing and you want to get Tellurium, do Ophelia. And that's pretty much it for the early resource farming guide. As always, I thank you very much for watching. I hope the video was helpful. And if you know any good farming spots that I've missed, because at the end of the day it's just me exploring an entire solar system, feel free to let people know in the comment section below. Alright, so I'll see you next time. Bye bye.